Welcome back to Celebrity Radio. It's Alex Belfield talking to some of the world's biggest stars and some of my favourite people, and a man who really did change the world. He's an innovator. He's one of those people who seems to have been around as long as music has been great. In 1985, he had his first #1. Since then, he's gone on to literally change the world. We'll talk about Live Aid and things like that in a moment. He's back on tour in 2015. Midge Ure, how are you?
I'm still alive, funnily enough. You made me sound like some ancient relic, but yeah, I'm still here.
Well, it is amazing. When I think of you and your name and your legacy, it does sort of feel like you've been around longer than you have, because within your time, you've done an awful lot, haven't you?
I have. I'm exceptionally lucky, and I'm the first person to kind of admit that. I seem to have stumbled and bumbled my way through a very bizarre but incredibly interesting career. So yeah, I mean, I suppose my first success would have been with the band Slick, which was way back in 1976, with my first #1 record. And if truth be told, after something like that, a kind of pop band, you should have disappeared once it died and gone away. And I was very fortunate that I was allowed to come back and do something that I wanted to do, as opposed to doing something that other people wanted me to do. So yeah, it has been a very long and varied career.
Next year you go on tour with the '80s Invasion. You're on tour this year with your own tour. After Slick, there you were with the Rich Kids and Thin Lizzy, Visage, and of course Ultravox, and then on to Live Aid. I mean, it's incredible how your career has sort of taken you from one thing to the next. Most people sort of have a hit and disappear. What's the reason for your longevity then? Why are you still here when so many are currently driving taxis?
I think there's a Scottish tenacity that comes with the it comes with the tartan and the shortbread, and it's just something that you have your first 15 minutes of success, and that would have been Slick, and it wasn't my 15 minutes. It was somebody else's talents. It was someone else who wrote the song, who produced the record. I just happened to be the vehicle that they used to get it out there. So I didn't feel as though I'd had my real crack of the whip. And I was fortunate enough, as you say, straight after Slick, to be invited to move from Glasgow, my hometown, down to London to join up with Glenn Matlock, ex-Sex Pistol, with his band, the Rich Kids. And through the Rich Kids, I was listening to a lot of music coming out of Europe at the time, so a lot of Germanic, electronics, from the likes of Kraftwerk and La Dusseldorf and things. And I bought a synthesizer, and I tried to integrate the synthesizer into the Rich Kids, which I did a little bit, but half the band hated it. So the synthesizer actually broke the band up, and the half of the band who liked the synthesizer went on to form Visage. It was a collective of all our favourite musicians at the time, one of whom happened to be Billy Currie from Ultravox. So through Visage, I ended up joining Ultravox. How bizarre is that?
What a life and career. And then I wonder, to people who are listening now, who are in their early teens or maybe 20s, who want to have your career, what have you learned? What is the best bit of advice? Is it to have great tunes or to have a great business head? Because one without the other seems to sort of lead to failure.
Yeah, I can't say I've got a great business head. I mean, I've probably taken far too many left turns where I should have turned right. But, I've got to be able to look back at all of those mistakes that I would have made and think, well, that mistake led me to something else, maybe something that I wouldn't have found had I made the right decision at the time. So I can't look back at any of it and think that there's any one plan. I have my own beliefs on this stuff. I'm a firm believer that, having started off by doing something that I didn't really want to do, the Slick thing, never to let myself be put in that position again, to always be the guy in charge, to always be the guy driving the bus, because then you can take it wherever you want it to go. So, stick to your guns, write as much and as often as you can, and try and make the music good, not just fashionable. Fashionable music tends to disappear and belongs in the annals of history. But good music will continue to be played forever.
Yeah, and I think the best example of that is Vienna, which is for me one of the greatest radio records in history. You've got to be proud of that record because it did sort of mark a change in music, didn't it?
It did. There are a handful of records you can think of over the last 50 or 60 years of proper, I suppose, commercial music, popular music, pop music. from the 50s onwards. And there are a handful of bits of music that just changed everything. Hey Jude for the Beatles. All of a sudden we had a 6-minute long song. Wuthering Heights for Kate Bush. Bohemian Rhapsody for Queen.
Yeah.
And Vienna for Ultravox. All oddities, all strange in their approach, but all really interesting and musically, defining moments for everyone else, because things changed when Vienna became successful. All of a sudden, electronic music was embraced, and it went against everything that record companies would have been telling you to do at the time. Make a 3-minute single and make it quick and fast. It's got to start with the chorus, no intro, and all of that stuff. You listen to Vienna; it's the antithesis of that. It's long, haunting, moody, atmospheric intro. It speeds up in the middle, and it's got a viola solo. It's just a bizarre thing, but people just loved it.
Well, it's anthemic as well. I remember Russell Watson did a version of it. I mean, it is almost classical, isn't it?
Well, Billy Currie, Ultravox's keyboard player, is a classically trained viola player. That's his instrument.
Right.
So he was brought up with that whole kind of mid-European, essence, that musicality, and it's very much that. You listen to the solo section of Vienna, this whole instrumental section, and it is, pseudo-classical. When Russell did his version of it, I just thought how fantastic that someone can take it and turn it into something that we hadn't anticipated it could be.
Yeah. Is that a great honour? I mean, when you find that somebody can take your song and make it into something brand new and sort of give it a new life, is that a thrill?
It's a thrill to hear anything that you've created done by someone else. I mean, some of the things I've heard over the years, are kind of cringe-worthy. But especially through the dance period, when people would take, If I Was or Him or Vienna, and put a beneath it, a whole dance groove thing happening, and you just think, well, I'm not sure it was that kind of word, but it's weird when you're standing in an elevator somewhere, and all of a sudden a kind of James Last type version of Dancing with Tears in My Eyes comes on through the little speaker, and you think, well, maybe that's real success. I don't know.
It is. Indeed, I worked for Gold. It was Capital Gold in those days. It's Gold now. And, the bands that you were in are sort of the backbone of that radio station, Thin Lizzy, Visage, Ultravox. Those songs are played day in and day out. When you hear them now, do you still get a little tingle and think, Christ, I'm still current?
Yes, you do. I have to say, when you hear the opening drum beat of Vienna coming out the radio, or the synth and guitar chug of Dancing with Tears in My Eyes, you still get a little buzz, because when you created those pieces of music, you didn't think they would have a shelf life. You thought they'd be, hopefully successful. In the UK, it was a very quick turnaround. You would chart, you'd be in the charts for 3-4 weeks, then it would disappear, and you would never hear the song again. You'd only hear the song on the radio if one of the band members had died. So to hear music still being played today, it keeps it alive, fresh, and vibrant.
Yeah.
So thanks to the internet, thanks to YouTube, thanks to all of those social media sources, that music still resonates now. So it's something that we couldn't have foretold back when we wrote it.
And it's arguably more credible than ever. It's had sort of a renaissance of people re-listening to it and going, no, actually, these were great tunes.
Well, the weird thing is, I mean, for something like Vienna, which never got to number one, it was voted recently by Radio 2 in the UK. They did a big public vote on a song that should have been number one that didn't get to number one, and of course Vienna was voted the one that should. So we were given an honorary number one almost over 30 years after it was written. So how bizarre is that?
Yeah, wonderful. And then, of course, you mentioned something earlier about those who didn't survive. I mean, you talked of Bohemian Rhapsody, of course, Freddie. So many of these greats didn't make it to your age. What do you think is the recipe for having huge success and surviving? Because it seems almost impossible that you can keep your sanity, have huge success, and still be here 30 years later. How have you managed it?
Well, I've had my moments where I got close to not managing it.
Yeah.
If you're a young guy, and all of a sudden you become very successful, and success means money, and money means you can get whatever your heart desires, and that hedonistic times like the early 80s can take you down routes that you didn't really plan on going. You're surrounded by people who don't tell you no. They will not say no to you. They will not tell you that you're acting like an idiot. They won't give you a clip behind the ear. So you're allowed to, in fact, you're maybe even encouraged in certain instances to be a bit outrageous. And I got to my point where I was just being stupid, and luckily I had a family around me who just said, "No, hold on a second, you're a working class boy from Glasgow. Just get on with the job at hand. Put your feet back in the ground." And I have to say, a family and close friends are great at doing that.
Yeah.
You could have played a huge concert and your head's full of your self-adulation.
Yeah.
And then you think, okay, well, I've got to go around the supermarket now and push a trolley around.
Yes.
That's the reality. That's how you keep the balance, by trying to do absolutely normal things, which I do.
I guess it's that ability to see yourself being a bit of an arse as well. I mean, could you see moments where sort of the black mist was coming and you were sort of getting bigger than your boots? How do you recognise that? Because I think for some it's almost impossible. They become invisible to it.
Well, yeah, I think maybe in the depths of it, while you're in whatever state you were in, my thing was alcohol, and when my good friend at the time, Jack Daniels, and I were teaming up, my manager used to sit there and say, "Hold on, you've just told me this 20 times.
Oh, wow.
I got it the first time. You don't have to keep saying it, because that's what you do when you're off your face, And
Yeah.
and I'd realised that I was doing that. I'd realised I was talking people into corners and doing all that stuff that happens to you at parties when someone's right in your face and they keep getting closer and you have to back away, and
Right.
And I was that perpetrator. I was the guy doing that. So yes, I mean, eventually you do get the point that you're being overbearing and just full of yourself, and you know what you're going on about really isn't that important. It's what we would call a high class worry. It's a high class problem, whatever it was I was moaning about,
Yeah.
because I was in a position of huge privilege.
Yeah.
So I had nothing to complain about.
Yeah, it's that first world worry, isn't it, when your private jet's 15 minutes late, isn't it?
Well, it's a little bit Spinal Tap, isn't it? It's like I remember complaining bitterly backstage somewhere that the rider, which is your list of wishes, whatever
Yeah.
they happen to be, your drinks and your food and all that stuff backstage. I remember completely giving this poor man a hard time because the champagne that we had backstage was supposed to be French champagne, and this wasn't. I didn't even drink champagne. I don't know what I was complaining about.
I guess it's when people say you can have it, it's hard to say no, isn't it? It's that line, though, also when people give up on you. Was there ever a point where your wife sort of looked at you and thought, I don't know whether I can take this anymore? Because there's only so much people around you can take, isn't there?
Yeah, I think in my instance, anything that's excessive, anything that's self-indulgent, is purely that. You only see yourself. You only think about yourself. You don't think about the huge ripples that you cause by doing this. What I was doing was having a massive effect on all the people around me, all the people I loved and cared about.
Yeah.
And when that was pointed out to me, I stopped. You had to draw a line under it and think, okay, what do I really want?
Yeah.
Do I want to be this little Hitler figure? Or, do I want to have the family that I always planned on having?
Yeah. How amazing you could recognise that, because so many of your generation didn't. Let's face it, when we look at Do They Know It's Christmas, it must be sad for you at a point where you look at that video and so many are missing, so many didn't make it. I want to talk to you about that period now, because 1981 was probably your biggest year. Is that fair to say?
I think it was the year that everything changed. I remember standing in a CD rehearsal studio in North London, where we seemed to spend most of our lives writing and rehearsing for touring and stuff. And my manager turned up at this place where managers don't go. Managers don't have to go to somewhere where your feet stick to the carpet because it's so scummy. They won't be there.
Yeah.
And of course, he turned up with a couple of big magnums of champagne under his arm because Ultravox and Visage had just charted that day at the same time. So all of a sudden I was the guy, and it was just bizarre. I was the producer and the writer, and, the creative of the moment. It was just a bizarre scenario. So yeah, 81 projected Ultravox from being a small club band to a band that could play, Crystal Palace Bowl or Wembley or whatever. So it was a whole different ballgame. It changed overnight.
And of course, Breathe Again is going on tour this year, 20 years on. You can find out more at midgeure.co.uk. I want to talk about, very finally, the Band Aid and Live Aid years, because I spent a year in Africa, in Nairobi in 2000, and my conclusion was that it was almost impossible to help them because there was so much corruption. And I saw an article just last week. I want your take on it now. Do you think it was all worth it? I mean, unquestionably, you brought attention to Africa, which it needed. But how much has actually changed? I mean, when we look at the numbers of people still in these huge camps who are homeless and have no food, no money, no life, no objective almost, what's your take on it at this point?
Think of trying to help any third world situation as a bit like running up a down escalator.
Yeah.
And the escalator's getting faster. And sometimes it feels like you're stagnant, you're standing still. You have to think what would happen if you stood still. You would be all the way back at the bottom, so the situation would get worse. So although it looks on the surface like the situation hasn't really changed, it has. I've spent 30 years doing this. I've spent 30 years answering that very question. Did it make a difference? Does it make a difference? And the bottom line is, yes, it does, because I've met the difference. I've seen the difference. I shook hands with the difference. I've met people who survived those aid camps in 1984, 1985, simply because somebody put their hand in the pocket and bought that record. Now, that's an amazing thing. It might not fix the problem. Hence the analogy of Band-Aid. We called the whole scenario Band-Aid because a Band-Aid in America is a plaster. It's a sticking plaster. So it can cover a cut, but it can't fix a severed arm. And it can't fix a heart attack, and it can't fix diseases, but it can certainly help. And that's exactly what we did. So, and we continue to do so. I think you have to find that in certain areas of Africa, fiscally, the country has really turned itself around in the last 30 years. So, it's things are changing, but it's not an overnight thing. You've been there. You've spent a year there. You see how vast that country is. That continent is.
Yeah.
There are many countries in Africa. It's massive. It's absolutely huge. And you stand there and look all around you and think, how can you possibly make a dent in this? There's a great story someone told me. Two people walking along a beach, and there'd been a storm the night before, and the beach was absolutely littered with starfish, all on the sand, and they couldn't move, and they couldn't get back to the water. And one person said to the other, I have to do something about this. The other one said, well, what? You can't. There are thousands of them. So the first person picked up one starfish, walked into the water, and put it in the water, and said, well, that's one. And that's how you've got to kind of look at it. It's one step at a time moving forward. And as I said, just think of that analogy of going down, standing still on a moving staircase. You go backwards. You've got to keep running and keep walking and keep moving forward to try and get to the top of it.
It's 30 years now since you launched that campaign. Do you think there'll ever be a time in our lifetime where we can not worry about Africa and not have to keep sending money and aid, and that they will be fed and watered?
Well, I think you've got to remember that politicians, any politician in the world right now would have watched, listened to, or read about Live Aid. They would have been affected by it because they were young people at the time. And maybe even some of them weren't around, right? At that time, but they certainly know about it because they've been taught about it at schools. It's in the history books. It wasn't just a musical revolution; it was a social revolution.
Yeah.
So it's an amazing thing. So you have to think that whatever effect that had on them internally will take them and guide them to do the right thing when they're in positions of power, because that's the only way things will change. If it's not Africa we're talking about, it'll be some other third world country.
Yeah.
We have huge discrepancies in our own country, socially and financially and economically, and we can't fix that. How can we fix something infinitely larger and so far away from us.
Yeah, it is ironic that in 1985 you were sending food to Africa, and now we have people stood outside food banks in 2015. It is ironic, isn't it?
Absolutely. Someone sent me this ancient old tin of coffee they found somewhere, and it was a gift from the Ethiopian people in 1952 or 53. A gift from the Ethiopians to the people of Britain, because we were hit. The whole south coast was hit by a massive flood. So back in the 50s, Africa was sending food to us. Yeah. Now that's irony.
It is. Do you still get chills when you hear, do they know it's Christmas, and that opening bar comes on the radio?
Yeah, absolutely. It's still, the record, the original record, still does its job to this day. And, I can say that because I produced it, because, that's me polishing my ego. It still works. It's not the greatest song in the world, but as a record, it was a great record. And that's due to the time, the effort, the passion went into it, and all the artists who lent their talents to make it a great record.
Midge, I could talk to you all day. It's been a great honour speaking to you. One moment from your career, if you could live it again and be back there, what would it be? You've had so many amazing moments.
You know what? The great moments are the ones that people don't see or know about. They're not usually done on a stage in front of thousands of people or on television or whatever. One of the greatest moments for me personally was sitting in my little house in Montserrat in the Caribbean when it still existed. It's now under 50 feet of volcanic ash. But I sat in this house with Eric Clapton playing old blues tunes, one-on-one, just the two of us and our lady friends at the time. And we had an absolute ball. And for me, as an aspiring kid, aspiring guitar player growing up in Glasgow, and thinking, Eric Clapton was God, what a moment that was.
Wow. You've had an amazing life and an amazing career, and here's to the next 20 years. Breathe Again Tour is back on the road. You can find out more by going to the website, midgeure.co.uk, and the 80s Invasion takes to the road next year, where the 80s people are back on the road doing what they did brilliantly. You've had such a remarkable life and an amazing career. I've really appreciated your time. Let's do it again.
I'd love to. It's been fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Midge.